Hi guys, so I'm just back from a trip abroad. I've been away for over a week now and away from the guitar as well, so I'm just starting to pick things up again. And I've got a gig tomorrow night, so I really need to get that fluidity back into my hands. Everything feels a little bit uneasy at the moment. And there are actually two approaches that I take when I'm developing like this, or when I want to push the speed, or when I want to inject some speed into my playing again. And I've spoken about both of them in the past. Now the first one is the traditional approach. You set up a metronome or something like that. You start within your ability, so you work on a scale or a phrase or an idea with the metronome set to a relatively slow speed. You work on that for a minute or so, and then you push the speed up by 1 or 2 beats a minute, and then you push and you push and you push until you're really pushing yourself in terms of speed, and then you reset again. So that's the first approach. And that's great from a point of view of thinking about tone. As long as you're doing that reset, as long as you come back into your ability again, and as long as you're approaching your phrase cleanly and then working up from there, then you can really sort of develop some speed around that. But I also find when you just do one of these things, you tend to plateau a little bit as well. So the other approach is to use bursts or little flurries of activity. And the idea here is you just sit on one position, and then just for maybe 5 seconds or so, you burst that little idea, you burst that little piece of activity, and then you stop again. And then you move somewhere else and you burst an idea, or you burst a little phrase, and then you move to another position again. And this is the approach that I want to talk about this week. It's really good, as I say, for breaking through the plateaus. If you've only ever used the other approach, then you probably find that this is really going to sort of kick-start your development again. And there are lots of reasons why. I think from a sort of a training point of view, it's much closer neurologically to what you're trying to achieve if you do it in bursts, if you actually approach the phrase at the speed you want to play it. The other thing you get from this, or the other problem you have with the other approach, is you tend to, when you're using a metronome, you tend to play the phrase, or you loop the activity over a period of time, over a few minutes. So you're working on the phrase, but you're not working on starting and stopping the phrase. Whereas when you're working with bursts, you're starting and stopping the phrase all of the time. So it's kind of training a different aspect of playing quickly. So I find that really useful. The other thing I like to do is to join 3 or 4 or 5 different exercises together. Or actually, in this case, I've joined 9 exercises together. And what I do is I'll do the first exercise for 1 minute, next exercise for 1 minute, next exercise for 1 minute. So it's constantly sort of forcing me to change my approach. And so what I thought I'd do this week is go through that in a bit more detail and connect these 9 exercises together. The other nice thing about these exercises is it doesn't matter whether you're an advanced player or whether you're a relative beginner, because this will push you, and what will push you is the speed, and that's the whole point really. So this is exactly what I do, and it wouldn't really matter to me whether you are more of a beginner or more of an advanced person. I'd still recommend you do a set of exercises like this. So let me show you anyway. Okay, so the first thing I work on for the first minute, so I've got my stopwatch started from 0 to 59 seconds. What I'll just do is I'll put my hand anywhere on the neck, just pick a string, and just see if I can do a tremolo on it. So all I'm doing. So in my case, I'm using my thumb, 3rd, 2nd, 1st pattern that I've talked about in previous videos. Yeah? And all I'm doing is resetting every time. And obviously, if you use a pick, you can do exactly the same thing. So just pick a note and see if you can do a tremolo on it, and reset every time. So what we're not doing is we're not staying there and bursting this note over and over again for 20, 30, 40 seconds. I'm only doing sort of 15, 16 notes before I move to somewhere else. And you can see I'm taking my hands off the neck, and and just seeing if I can reset and instantly play that note. Yeah? And I'm changing strings all the time as well. So that's the first minute. Okay, so let's move on to the second minute. So for the second minute, what I'm doing is I'm still doing that same tremolo movement, but this time I start to bring in the left hand as well. So again, we're staying on one string for a burst for a short period of time, but what I'm going to do is just play 3 notes. So I'm just going to play 3 notes that you'd find in a standard 3 notes per string pattern. And I'm playing them in a sort of a descending line. Yeah? And then I move. I don't really stick into any key when I'm doing this. But what I'm trying to do is just keep challenging myself with different places on the guitar neck and see if I can just drop on and play that little 3-note descending line. So what this is doing, this is challenging my left hand right hand synchronization, and also it's building that finger independence. And you kind of get the same thing with the pick actually. If you were using pick, you'd start with a downstroke, and the second time round you'd be starting with an upstroke, then downstroke, upstroke. Yeah? And with my particular finger picking, I'm starting with my thumb. Second time round I was starting with my index finger. Third time, middle finger. Fourth time, thumb. Yeah? So all I'm trying to do here is to just challenge myself to be able to reset to anywhere on the neck. Okay, so we move on to the third minute then. So this is my stopwatch is going from the 2 minutes to 2 minutes 59. And we're doing almost the same thing, but we're turning the shape round. So my left hand, instead of playing 3 notes descending, is playing 3 notes ascending. Yeah? In just a little 8 times round or 4 times round that little shape. And it's worth being aware that when you're playing sort of 3 notes per string major scale shapes, you'll encounter 3 types of fingering patterns. So the first one is that, where you have a tone between each note. So you play a fret, miss a fret, play a fret, miss a fret, play a fret. So it's worth using that on every string. The other pattern you'll find is a semitone, so 2 frets together and then a tone. Get used to that, and then finally a tone and a semitone. So when I'm resetting, I'll be using one of those 3 patterns, yeah? So that's the third minute. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth minute. So the stopwatch is going from 3 minutes to 3 minutes 59. And what I do now is I start to bring a second string into the pattern. So I'm playing 6 notes descending. So this is forcing me to think about string crossing now. And again, 3 notes per string in one hand, and this hand's playing a 4-note pattern. And similarly, if you're using a pick, you need to be thinking about how are you going to escape the strings to play the next string down. And again, we're playing a little burst anywhere on the neck. And the idea here is to just reset to anywhere. Now the patterns you should be playing really should come out of the scales that you already know. So think about a particular position on the neck and see if you can play the scale from that. So let's move on to the 5th minute then. And not surprisingly, the 5th minute is just like the 4th minute but turned around. So we're going to play an ascending 6-note line. And by doing this, you'll find that how you approach string crossing is going to change, depending whether you're using a pick or my fingerstyle technique. Yeah. And of course, it's forcing your left hand to start to be a little bit more agile on the neck as well. And it's forcing your right hand to be that much more accurate about string crossing. And again, we just play in bursts and then we move. And the idea is to just keep pushing that speed. See if you can achieve that speed where you're starting to challenge yourself, you're making some mistakes, but you're actually improving as well. You can feel yourself improving. Yeah? Okay, so now we're moving on to the 6th minute, and things are going to start to get a little bit more tricky again because we're going to bring in a 3rd string. And again, we're going to start with a descending line, 3 notes on the next string, 3 notes on the string below, so 3 strings in a row, and then come back up, 3 notes on that middle string again. And we're just playing a little burst like that. Yeah, and then you reset again, and just think of another 3 notes per string position. Yeah. And again, you're pushing the pace. Yeah. Okay, so that's the next thing to work on. So we're up to the 7th minute now. So we're at 6 minutes to 6 minutes 59 on the stopwatch. And what we're going to do is again take that same idea but turn it around. So you'll find it changes the way you approach string crossing. You're going to start with a low note now. Play an ascending line across all 3 strings, and then a little 3 note line in that middle string, and then start again. And then reset somewhere else and see. And then reset. Okay. And you can hear I'm starting to struggle with this kind of stuff now. It's been a while since I've done anything like this. And taking that week off hasn't helped me at all. Okay, for minute 8, doing the same thing again. I'm going to work across 3 strings, but we're going to change things around a little bit. What we're going to do is descend, and when we hit that low note, we're going to ascend up the scale. And then you descend again. So we're looping. And you'll find, because previously you've been working on sort of triplet kind of movements, this is probably going to trip you up a little bit. And again, you just play it in one position and then move somewhere else. Like that. So you can hear it's challenging me a bit. So that's the 8th minute. 9th minute is pretty much the same pattern again, but we're going to start from the low note. So you start by ascending the scale, and then you rotate. that's it. And again, you play a little burst and then you move on. And then you reset to somewhere else. Yeah, change strings. But use 3 notes per string scale shapes. You could work up and down a pattern if you like. But the idea is always to start and stop and see if you can move into a new position, reset your hands and see if you can drop straight into that scale again. Okay, so typically what I do is it's basically a 10-minute practice routine. So I do that and then I take a break and I come back and do it again, take a break and come back and do it again. And just allow that to improve my playing. Now the other thing I like to do is once in a while just slow it right down again and think about the quality of the notes that I'm playing. And so I play each of those phrases, but I play them a little bit slower. And just listen to the tone quality and see if I can reset my technique, because I don't want to get too sloppy. The burst approach will really kind of accelerate your development, accelerate your speed, but it also has the risk of making you a little bit of a sloppy player. The other technique that I spoke about earlier, where you start well within your means and then you slowly accelerate, tends to sustain the technique but doesn't generate the speed. So you find that if you move between one and the other, you get the best of both worlds. So that's why I like to train one and then train the other. And you find if you plateau with one, you can move to the other one and suddenly start accelerating again. So both useful techniques, both great ways of developing that speed or picking up the guitar again, developing your technique again. Anyway, hopefully that was useful for you and we'll chat next time. Goodbye.